Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the MMA Dungeon. I am joined today by a good friend of mine, Pat Danna. You can find his coverage at K-Side Press and the MMA Prospect Vault. Pat, first of all, thanks so much for hanging out with me.
Of course, of course. I'm happy to be on. I've been waiting anxiously for your question of when would you like to come on my show?
Man, you're always welcome. You're always welcome. One of the guys who kind of showed me the ropes, and so very grateful for that. I asked you to come on today. Of course, we're going to cover some of the happenings of this past weekend, primarily the biggest news, which is not UFC news for once, right? It's how it goes. Well, we'll talk about some UFC news as well, but the Netflix MVP joining forces, coming together to do their first ever MMA card. Throughout the buildup of this card and while watching it, I thought a lot of you and the work that you do in the coverage of regional, prospect MMA, kind of individuals. And I think in general, the dynamic or the notion was that they did a good job finding talent that was unsigned, right? They dared to do something that some people thought was impossible. And we'll talk a little bit about kind of the matchmaking later on, but just like overall, my feelings were pretty good. I enjoyed watching it. Obviously, we have a lot to talk about. The video is not just going to be this couple seconds, but what were your thoughts just overall? 1,000-foot view. What do you think of the card?
I thought it was pretty good. I mean, like you said, they got big names. Did a good job of signing that regional talent that was unsigned. So I think they did a really good job overall with the card. And what I'm more interested in is, will they continue with this? Obviously you could say you're going to continue with it, but when things get to planning, things change. So I'm really just interested to see if they do actually continue and do another event this year.
That's right. That's right. I mean, that seems to be like the biggest mystery in all this. And I think sometimes some of the responses that like Nikisa and Jake and some of the folks involved, I mean, even Ariel a little bit, it implied that it's likely going to keep happening. I think there were like numbers, like maybe they were theoretical, like if you were to keep going, how many cards would you see? And the numbers I heard were like 4 to 6 a year or something. But the reality is nothing has been committed to. I think contractually they don't have any sort of commitments, like no pen has hit paper yet. But I would love to see it keep going. I think it's an interesting dynamic to think about. Are they taking a stand against the UFC? Are they actually facing the UFC and competing against them as much as the buildup led folks to believe? Right, some of the stuff that Ronda might have said. There was a huge like narrative of like this is fighter first, and we're gonna do right by the fighter, unlike the big dogs. I don't think it's actually. I don't think that dynamic is as clear as they are making it seem. But who knows? Who knows? I do think we see another card. I have a ton of notes here, some stuff I shared with you, but we'll just go through it, kind of go with the flow and see kind of where the conversation takes us. The first takeaway that I wanted to talk about and get your opinion on is I think that there is a huge value in how important events feel. And me and you watch a lot of MMA. We watch regional MMA, probably shows with a few hundred folks in it, and then we watch things with tens of thousands of folks. And I think as somebody I had my wife with me, we had some buddies over watching, and as somebody who often shows outsiders kind of the fighting world, it does feel a little bit easier. I feel like the promotion is helping me out when they have a big fight feel and big shows and promos and large arena lights, the smoke, the fog. Obviously, we have opinions on these things. Whether we need it or not for a fight to intrigue us is irrelevant. I think what matters is how important does it feel to the rest of the world. And when you're airing fights on Netflix, I think it's very important for the event to feel important, in contrast to something like, and I'm going to jump right into it, the UFC Apex. So, your thoughts, I guess, on the show itself as a production, how important it felt, how big it felt, and we'll talk about some of the nuances, right after.
Yeah, no, I mean, just to get it started, like it definitely felt bigger than like a UFC Apex show, right? Like you said, like the feel of it, the look of it, that's all. Like it was a lot bigger than an Apex show. And even there, watching with my friends, we were bouncing back and forth between the Netflix card and the Apex card. So we were going back and forth, but our priority was the Netflix show and was the Netflix card because the Apex card really didn't bring as much just
Right.
fun and intrigue and the names, you know what I mean? Like this was obviously the bigger card this weekend. And like you said, the visual feel of it and just watching it, you could clearly tell that this was meant to be a significantly bigger event than a UFC Apex show.
Yeah. And I have this test that I've kind of made up. I think I've sent you pictures of my setup before. I have these two TVs stacked on top of each other. Over time in the man cave, it just felt right to have two TVs. I was tired of split screening. And I have a test that I do, which is the volume test. Which of these two TVs is going to have volume on, right? So I remember like somebody that was over watching asked like, which one of these has like more skill, like which fight is more skilled, right? And obviously, I mean, I think it's obvious, maybe to you and I, and maybe not to some other folks, but I think it's obvious that the Apex card obviously was a better showcase of current MMA skill, maybe with the exception of some folks that were on the Netflix card, and we'll talk about those as well. But like on average, the MMA level that was being competed in various cage structures on Saturday was much higher at the UFC Apex at their warehouse. But the volume test proved that the Netflix card was the more engaging event. I had the volume on, and let me put in some of these photos real quick. I had the volume. Obviously, this is later in the cards. I had the volume on for the lower TV, for the bottom TV. The top one was muted because I know what an Apex card is going to present. Obviously, part of it is the mystery, but I also think it is the showmanship. It's not just that this is the first Netflix event, so I need to hear what they say. I need to hear the commentary. It's not just that. It's, again, the importance and the production that they put on. And I mean, look at these. One of these is in a warehouse, right? I'll flip through some of these photos. It was very interesting. The yin and the yang, the dynamic of fights happening in a literal warehouse. And I like this picture in particular because it shows, the Apex crowd and then the MVP crowd. Obviously there's some stuff to talk about there as well with the crowd and how packed it was. And we have some friends that were there in person that could speak to it, but it was just interesting to look at these two screens and say, okay, one of these looks way more important than the other. And if you told me, like, as somebody who has no idea what anything looks like, and let's say there was no branding, you told me which one of these looks like a show the UFC would put on, UFC is synonymous to some people with like the biggest fight promotion in the world. I would have thought the bottom one. So
Yeah.
it was interesting that they won the volume test from my side.
Yeah, no, and I think they won just more than the volume test. Like I said, I just feel like it looked like a bigger event just watching it, and it looked like they at least tried to make it very important. You know, they tried to make it a big thing,
Yeah.
and you can't really say the same with a lot of these Apex shows. You know, it's kind of the opposite.
And I think I credit part of it to MVP because they come from the boxing world. Um, I think boxing events, marquee boxing events, typically have a level of importance. It's part of the product. It has to feel very important. They're putting these boxing events on, in incredible places, Times Square, in front of the pyramids this Saturday. There's something about boxing that is important. It feels like the whole world stops, especially when we're talking about like some of the older, like Muhammad Ali fights. There's stories that are told, and the narrative is like the whole world stops. And so MVP coming from the boxing world, even if their product was primarily focused on women's boxing, I think they still have that inherent, like, boxing is an important event. It's a cultural event. They were able to translate that over. So UFC has had events at the Intuit Dome, and again, it might have been better matchmaking and better fights and more skill, but it felt like Netflix did the whole, this is important. While they took the dynamic of MMA is exciting as a sport. Like, I find MMA far more exciting than boxing, and I think most people do. They took the excitement of MMA and the importance of boxing and brought it together for this one event.
Yeah, I can agree with that. It definitely it felt like there were like a lot of aspects they brought over from like streaming boxing and everything like that. So it makes sense that it kind of had a mix of that. You know, obviously we're watching an MMA event, but it feels like you're almost watching a boxing event. But I kind of like that. You know, it's different for MMA. We don't really get that feel too often. So I felt like it was a nice switch up, and it's something I could get used to for sure. You know, and I like the way they did the whole broadcast production and
Yeah.
everything. Like it felt right for the stakes of the event, and it felt solid for what their first MMA event was. So
I'm curious your take, and I didn't put this in the notes, so I'm kind of putting you on the spot, but I'm curious, like, what would you think have happened differently, if at all, if they went up against a non-Apex event. Like let's say, the week prior they went up against 328, the Chimaev versus Strickland card that happened at Prudential. What would have been different?
That's rough. I mean, the attention, right? I mean, the attention just wouldn't have been there. Like, like I said, me and my friends were swapping back and forth. I don't know if we would have been swapping
Right.
as often. We would have
Right.
been stuck on UFC 328, if anything. I mean, that event was also just a tough one in general because it was so big.
Yeah.
The hype between Strickland Chimaev, the fact that there was another title fight with Van Tyra. There were just good fights throughout that card. So I feel like the hype was a little bit different. So comparing this to that, it doesn't compare, to be honest. But I feel like they'd probably have gotten rinsed out, to be honest. Like no
I
one would
think
have
they would have moved
watched.
the event. I really do think they would have.
Yeah, yeah. Like it's tough to say, but I mean, I just don't see a way they would have done very well, like
Yeah.
competing against the UFC 328 caliber card.
Yeah, I think there was questions asked. I don't remember exactly what media day was, but obviously in the build-up, this card has been talked about for a few months now. There was a question asked to Dana at some point about like they're happening at the same time or something like that, and there was also questions asked on the MVP side to both Jake and Nikisa, and I think at some point they said like we're not too worried about it. Both parties seem to mutually not to be too worried. Obviously the UFC, it's a house show for them essentially, and maybe they're like marketing dollars and their efforts, they're not too concerned. And then on the MVP side, it's kind of a win-win because they get to say that they went up against a UFC event and they had no problems. But in reality, they the UFC accidentally, because I don't think it was purposeful that they scheduled an Apex card that day.
Yeah,
I think they got lucky, right? The situation worked out in both parties' favors to some extent. But I will say the dichotomy of like I'm glad that it went the way it did, not because it allowed MVP to do better, but because as a analytical thinker, as a viewer, as somebody who tries to analyze how the space is operating, it was very interesting for me to see, and it's something that can be used in a lot of talking points going forward, to see two fights happening in the Intuit Dome with the production that they put on that we just raved about, versus fights in a warehouse. And I've never really been one to complain too much about the Apex. I think if especially if you can get there in person, there is a place for the Apex cards in the world of MMA, UFC, and I know you've been there a couple times and covered events, so I'm sure you've had great experiences. But it made me realize, I think, for the first time, that it really is just a giant warehouse. Like it never felt as unimportant of a facility as it was when I saw the two in comparison. So I don't know if you felt the same way. Again, as someone who's been there, how do you feel just in general about the Apex cards? And did this event highlight some sort of dynamic that you didn't see before, or is it kind of a lot of the same?
it didn't highlight something I haven't seen before, and maybe that's just because I've been to the Apex. But having been there, you kind of said it right, where being there is like really cool. It's a lot more personal. You feel like a lot more like in tune with everything. There's so much less distraction and noise and everything. Uh, but it's not like I never loved it from a viewing perspective. I never was a guy that really talked out against it either because I understood the purpose of it. But I mean, it's it's like you said, it's just like a warehouse. There's nothing special about it. Like they added seats, that's nice. Like, definitely more people there now than there were, but it's not special. It's meant to just hold a weekly card because now that they're basically obligated to hold nearly weekly
Yeah,
cards, they have to, find ways to cut marketing expenses, cut expenses in general, travel, all that. So it just makes it so much easier if they just host it at home. But other than being there in person and actually experiencing it, I've never preferred the Apex to anything.
mhm,
You know
right.
what I mean? So it's just one of those things where I didn't really notice like a different dynamic necessarily, but I think it's just because like the Apex never like wowed me. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think certainly it definitely highlights it to some folks who maybe haven't been to the Apex like myself. And I mean, I still want to eventually attend some fights there, either covering it or just attending as a fan. I've heard only great things from the people who have been there. It's crazy. It's ironic, and I think that applies to like across the board. Like if you talk to anybody about going to events in person, they're going to tell you that they love it. And then you talk to people who only watch fights on TV, they're going to tell you it's the best experience in the world. There's just something about being involved that I think changes the perspective. But for a second, I do want to talk about just the overall card. Go back to this and talk about the fights themselves, the fights, the talent that was on there. Did anything jump out to you as like a fight that kind of, I don't want to say didn't fit, but there's one fight in here in particular that I'm focused on. There might be two, but it's really like, yeah, I'd say like one or two of these that really to me stood out against the rest, and I think was a bigger story than the overall card. Just talk to me about these fights in general and what you thought.
Okay, now I'm curious. I'm curious what fights you're pointing out there.
Yeah.
But with that said, I don't know if I felt that there was any out of place necessarily. I think they did a good job of blending. Like, they blended some younger guys, some prospects. They blended former Bellator PFL champions, bigger names like Alini Pereira, Parnas, who's massive in Europe. So I feel like they did a good job blending. But I mean, it like in terms of like meshing, I feel like the card did well. Uh, Name wise, I don't know. I'm really curious which two fights you picked out
Yeah.
here.
I mean, I never really talked about it, but I do think that there's two fights on here, and it's Adriano Moraes, and it was supposed to be Muhammad Mokaev, which got replaced obviously with hometown hero of ours here in Jersey, Phumi Nkuta, and the Parnes and Cross fight. I think those two fights in particular, it almost felt like they didn't make sense to me, and this might, I don't want to say it's because it's not meant to be insulting to any party, but like it just feels like those two fights are peak, and like those two guys, all four of those gentlemen are in a different league maybe than the rest of this card. The rest of this card is either people that are still trying to build their repertoire, trying to build a name and a brand for themselves, and on the their prospects. There's definitely some prospects on here, and then some of the other ones I think are on more of the tail stretch of their career. They have incredible name value, and I mean, I'm not going to pretend like they're washed. Like I think there's a couple fighters on here, and we'll talk about some of them if it comes up. There's a couple fighters on here that are on the tail end of their career, but could still keep up. But those two fights felt like those could be main events in any other global MMA promotion right now, whether it's UFC, PFL, One Championship. It didn't feel so much as the spectacle type of fight that these were. Did you not feel the same about those two fights?
Uh, I don't I don't think that's a bad statement, like I can't say I disagree with that statement. I think Parnas and Cross did feel out of place. I do agree with that. That fight was just weird to me. It was really weird matchmaking, to be quite honest with you. Just knowing, the background of Parnas and the background of Cross. Cross is a solid fighter, but never a guy that I thought was on or even close to Parnas's level, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, yeah.
No disrespect to Cross, he's a solid fighter in the US, on the US regional scene.
Mhm.
Parnas is one of the best fighters in Europe, arguably the best fighter in Europe for, I mean, what, 5 years now? It's been a couple of years now, maybe not five, but it's been a bit that he's been basically the best fighter in Europe. So I just felt like it was a weird cross there of fighters, like the way they matched up. I didn't think they did
Yeah.
much. And when it came to Moraes versus Pumi, I feel like that was just, they wanted it to be Mokaev, right? And I feel like that matchup would have maybe fit better, you know. But with Pumi stepping in, I mean, they still got a top North American prospect on the card, which kind of added to their prospect level. And then they put him up against a vet, former one champion,
Mhm.
and I don't hate it. Like I don't think that was that out of place. It just might have been. I don't know. I just think they wanted a showcase matchup there, maybe for
Right, right.
Pumi. Maybe they wanted Pumi to make a name there. Showcase him. And I mean, he was potentially 1 second away from doing so. We'll talk about that, but yeah, no, I think that one fits in more than Parnas Cross. I do agree though. Parnas Cross does feel off now that you bring it up. I just don't like it's such a random fight. Such a
Yeah,
random
yeah.
fight.
Yeah, I mean, you know a lot more about matchmaking, I guess, and the regional scene than I. Which one of these fights, and I guess the one I'm thinking isn't even like a regional individual or whatever. Which one of these fights seemed like the most confusing matchmaking, or maybe the most lopsided matchmaking? We're probably thinking of the same fight, but of the whole card, which one of these do you think made the least sense, I should say, matchmaking wise?
I could name a couple, to be honest with you. I mean, Ngannou Lins, like, like Lins was never a guy that was going to
You
be.
wouldn't put the Dos Santos Spain fight a bit, that felt like a dangerous matchup, right? Like,
It felt like a dangerous matchup, and the inevitable kind of happened.
right.
But at the same time, I mean, there's like a time in the world, right,
Mhm.
when JDS would have whooped Spain.
Of
The
course.
Spain, right? You know what I mean? Like there's a time that exists where that would have happened.
Okay, I
Like
see where you're going with this.
there's never a time in history that Linz would have beaten Ghana.
I see where you're
You
going
know,
with.
there's
Okay.
never a time in history I don't think that
Yeah.
Cross would have beat Parnas. There
Can
was
you
never a
think?
time in history even that I think Alberto Morales would have beaten David Ngoyan. You know,
Okay.
like I feel like there was a couple fights that are like you can at least justify that JDS was a former champ. He was good. You know, he was in the UFC. Uh, Obviously Robellis was, but I mean JDS's success in the UFC compared to Robellis is like night and day, you know. So at least there's some things you could look at and be like, okay, that was a matchup. Those couple I just named were kind of just
Yeah.
like what to me, you know.
I mean, I'm glad you brought up the Ngannou Lin's fight, because I think something about the heavyweight division, like we're talking about importance. Heavyweight division, even though it's in shambles right now, to many people's opinion, within the UFC, I do think that the heavyweight division is still the most exciting, one of the easiest divisions to sell. Again, if things are in a better state than now, so that's one that I tried to like mentally ask myself, like, what options were they weighing out? Right, when I asked myself, why is Felipe Lins fighting Francis Ngannou on this card, I asked myself, well, who do they, who else, who do they have? What are the options? Was there anyone that you may think of or know that is out there in the world that's not tied up? I mean, we know like we'll talk about the Jon Jones thing for a second, but like who would have taken his place that made sense? Or were you thinking like a prospect who maybe doesn't have whatever little name value, Linz has in current day, a prospect who would have been more competitive even if it doesn't sell as well?
I don't know if would have had to have been a prospect necessarily. But just even Linz, like you know what I mean? Like he hadn't fought for a while. Like
Mhm.
his last fight was in the UFC against Cutelaba. It'd been over 2 years, I'm pretty sure. Everyone wants to talk about, oh, Francis hasn't fought in XXX. He's had an MMA fight more recently than Linz did, you know?
Mhm.
I just
Mhm.
feel like Linz was such a random pull out of nowhere that he also was a light heavyweight, you know, last time he fought in the UFC, and he was a light heavyweight in this fight. He weighed in at
Right.
220. You know what I mean? Like they couldn't have even really found a heavyweight for Ngannou to match up
Yeah.
with. They found a light heavyweight that just didn't cut weight. And I don't know. Like I don't get me wrong. The landscape of the heavyweight division on the regional scene and everything, it's tough. It's
Yeah.
tough. There's no doubt that it's not easy to find a capable fighter at this point. But I feel like they could have found someone at least more compelling than Felipe Lins. Uh, like I don't know. There's a couple names that come to mind, but even like looking now, you know, they had the Spain kill poor old JDS for no reason.
Mhm.
They had Ngannou kill Lins, and then it's like, okay, well, what about Ngannou versus Despain?
Well, I'm glad I was just gonna say, I feel like I saw that a little bit online, and
Yeah,
part of me was like, how did they think to not do?
that,
What
that,
made
that
them think?
why wouldn't have they just made that at this point? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I guess Robellis to Spain KOing JDS is the biggest win of his career,
Yeah.
right? Like, even in karate combat, you want to count that. Like, JDS is the biggest name, biggest win of his career.
Yeah.
But I mean, does knocking out a 42-year-old JDS really mean anything to anyone?
Mhm.
The
Yeah.
42-year-old JDS that hasn't fought in 2 years, you know, the last time he did it was in bare knuckle. It's like I don't know what that does, and I know Ngannou KOing Livens does nothing. You know, it does nothing for Ngannou's stock or anything, like, you know. So at least to Spain, you can make the argument. You know, he went over to karate combat, killed it. He's coming back to MMA. Two big power punchers. You know, who's going to knock out who? Like with Linz, they couldn't even market it as
Mhm.
like, oh, Linz could knock out Ngannou, because could he?
Mhm.
No. You know, he was never knocking Ngannou out. If anything, he was winning a decision, you
Right,
know?
right,
But he was
right.
not like at least you could have marketed the Spain versus Ngannou a bit better. And I mean, I guess they have the hype now because both of them now won on this card. So it might have not been a bad move, and that might have been their plan in the end, anyways. But I just feel like the Lins fight doesn't move me at all,
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
honest. Like it doesn't change my view of Ngannou in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah. I want to come back to the main card real quick, but let's start kind of in the order the fights happen, right? Obviously, the opener was Chris Avila, Brandon Jenkins. I got to talk to Brandon Jenkins ahead of time. I was very excited for that fight. I knew that the two of them would kind of stand and bang, and really that it might not have been the most technical, like very active fight, but the volume from Jenkins' side was insane. I kind of knew that Chris Avila was gonna have a little bit of a slower pace, but obviously his chin is incredible. I think they set the tone, as good as you possibly could out of all the fights that were on here. Did you feel any sort of way about like in general, just across the board, the scoring? Like I feel like with the first two fights, the scoring was a bit confusing to me, the way the judges were scoring things. I think Jenkins maybe won a split, and I don't think he should have. And I also think, not to jump too far ahead, but like I think the next fight, in my opinion, I think the wrong person got scored the win for that. But in general, did you feel the same way about scoring? Like any thoughts there?
There were some weird scorecards, I feel like, throughout the night, just in general. I mean, I know we didn't get many decisions after the early portion of the fight, but I did see some of the scorecards that came out, and it was interesting to me, you know? So the scoring in general, I think, was a bit interesting. And then the fights that did go to decision, saw some interesting scores. I thought Jenkins won. I didn't get to see the whole fight because this is when I was still flipping back and forth a lot. So I think I was watching UFC at this point, but I didn't get to see the full fight. But from what I saw, I did think Jenkins did enough to snag some rounds. I think it was what, the first and the
I think
second, was it?
first I had it all. I mean, I had all three, but like I could
Yeah.
see
Okay.
where they were coming from in the second one. Um, but it just the second fight, especially Aileen Pereira versus Masan Wong. I think that the wrong person won. I don't know if there's a new dynamic these days, and I've noticed it a lot more dominantly, like in the UFC. There's a new dynamic of like scoring for damage way more than like I guess position, right? Or yeah, I guess position, which I think is the direction the sport wants to head in. And from the little that we ever hear from like officials or rules experts, it seems like it's intentional. Um, I don't know how relevant that was to that second fight, but it felt like the wrong person won in my opinion. I don't know. Did you have that for Pereira?
I, I
Did you
thought
score
I
it?
thought Pereira eked it out, but it was close enough that I thought you could score it from Mason Wong. I didn't think too much of it, to be honest. I just thought Pereira kind of won a close fight.
Yeah.
You know, she used her length well. Like I don't know, it wasn't a fight that was like a decisive, clear winner that I'm like putting my foot down and I'm like, no, this one won. Like
Okay.
I just kind of think it was like a toss up, and I do think Pereira did enough to edge it out.
It's definitely one that I think I might rewatch. Depends. I got a lot of free time. I have to have a lot of free time, I think, to rewatch that one. But moving on to the next fight, David McGoyan versus Alvaro Morales. I think the bigger narrative that came out of this for me was the presence of Arman Tsarukyan has become like it's cool that he was cornering his boy and his boy won, but I think his presence has almost become like a product for a lot of promotions. Just it's one thing to have him compete, whether he's doing like RAF or these hype grappling matches or whatever, but just like his presence, it's like the cameras are looking at him, the commentators are talking about him, the fighters are accrediting their win to him, and then there's the whole build up thing. I want to talk about the build up between him and Namo Fazil.
Yeah.
In general, I mean, like if I had to summarize the presence of Arman Tsarukyan in somebody's corner, he needs to behave. Like I think it's been drilled into the dirt at this point, but like he needs to behave. If you're unable to be in the fight scene without potentially participating in the fighting, maybe you don't corner folks. I don't know how much of that I think a lot of it was just entertainment value, but I do think that there was some real tension briefly between Namo Fazil and Arman, and I think it's just they both have that type of easily triggered personality to kind of they don't really take things too lightly when said at them. But your thoughts on Arman Tsarukyan potentially having a fight on a card that he wasn't scheduled to fight on?
Uh, am I supposed to be surprised? I mean, he does this all the damn time. I swear. Every time I turn around, Arman's doing something new to ruffle someone's feathers, try to fight them, cause a scene. Like he's always doing something. I mean, it's part of the appeal with him. You know, it's part of why he's gotten so big is because he doesn't stop. He's always up to something.
Yeah.
for his actual fighter though, David McGoyan, I did want to say he is only 21, so he
Mhm.
has so much time. Can't rush him, and he's already gotten some decent matchups at this point. He had the loss to Tommy McMillan on Contender Series, and since then, the two fights he's had, it's almost it's rough because I don't think he's shown improvement, like the improvement
Mm.
you'd want to see. Don't get me wrong, like I said, 21 years old. He has a lot of time to show the improvement. He's already 9-1 at 21, has been on the Contender Series, has been in brawls, has gotten dropped, gotten back up. But I don't know. I would have liked to have seen more improvement and more like conviction out of Ngoyan following the Contender Series, and you just haven't gotten it. I would have really liked to have seen him finish this fight. He got dropped in his fight before this against Javier Garcia. He's just a guy that I was very high on at one point, but I just want to see more conviction out of him. He needs Arman to teach him like how to really get a finish when you need one.
Yeah, yeah. I think I had the same feeling. It did seem like during the fight, he obviously it felt pretty dominant in his direction. I was wondering how aggressively he was chasing a finish. His record, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I do think he has a decent amount of. I mean, how decent? How big of a number could it be? He has out of his 9 wins, he has 5 of them by knockout or TKO and 1 submission. So the numbers are there, but I think to your point, it seems like now that he's kind of up in the big leagues, right? Contender Series, and then this fight, it does seem like the finishing power is not fully there. He went to a war with Tommy McMillan. It was a great fight. I have feelings about Tommy McMillan also with his finishing capabilities and kind of how he performed in that fight. But I would certainly agree with you. Very promising, though. To be honest, I think very promising.
Yeah, no, I think he is very promising. Like I said, still so young, still so much time to improve. Just about actually seeing those improvements and then being able to judge him off of them.
Yeah. Any thoughts on this next fight?
Jason Jackson, Jeff Creighton.
Yeah. I mean, crazy knockout, but I really either
Another
one of
kind
those
of
guys could have done it
mismatch.
to the other, and I don't know if I would have been too shocked. So, I don't have too much to say there.
I think it was a little bit of a mismatch only because I feel like Jason Jackson is just on a different level. I mean, to be fair, we could have seen Jeff Creighton make a run. He had a fight in Bellator, and if he ended up making a run there, he could have ended up fighting Jason Jackson. That's a fight that very well could have happened.
Yeah.
Not that Creighton is bad, but just on short notice against a guy like Jason Jackson, I just never really had any belief in him for this fight. Did
Mhm.
I think he was going to get knocked out in 22 seconds? No.
Yeah.
But I didn't think he would win. But I mean, Jason Jackson, like just blazing with these wins. He's just a great fighter at this point. He's 35. He's probably not going to go to the UFC or anything. He's 2-2 in his last 4, but his 2 losses are to top fighters. That Thad Gene decision
Hmm.
was controversial at the time. And then even against Magomedov, he came back and he won the championship rounds. He just lost the first 3, so he couldn't win the belt. But he has the win over Amasov. Like, he's always going to be a great fighter, Jason Jackson. I'm really happy he was a guy that was brought onto this card because I don't want him to be a guy that just like has to get forgotten or go to these random regional shows and stuff. He deserves better than that, and this kind of event is exactly what he deserves.
Yeah. No, I don't have too much to add to that. I think the next fight is really where things kind of took a turn and the narrative started to build out for this card. Obviously, this is a fight that I would tell people to go watch if you missed it. This is a fight that I would watch over and over. It was a great performance. Obviously, there's a little bit of, I don't want to say bias, but like some personal investment. Obviously, Phumi Nkuta is a Jersey fighter, fights in the regional scene around us. And I mean, he's fights in all time. I think he has, was it 5 different championships across a couple different promotions. It speaks to his talent and his efforts. He does pro wrestling. He's great on the mic. His personality is there. So this was really his moment to shine. And I think we'd probably both agree that he did do it. He did, he got the job done. He did exactly what, like, word for word, I think he dreamt of doing up until the paper says 4 minutes and 59 seconds. I think it was 5 minutes and 3 seconds is when it really happened. Obviously, let's just get it out there right now. Do you agree with how things went down in that finish?
No, not really. I mean, it's tough because it's almost like a Marab Ricky Simon situation.
Hmm.
Only if I remember correctly, right? Ricky Simon didn't hold the choke for an extra 2-3
Right.
seconds, you
Yeah.
know? And that's where it gets like weird and interesting. Like I don't know. Uh like in the moment, I wasn't sure, right? I was like, they might have made the wrong call, they might have not. I'm really not sure. Looking back at it, it does like all the video evidence points to Pumi being awake when the bell rung, and he went out in those 2-3 seconds
Hmm.
after the fight had ended, but the choke was still in
Yeah.
place. That was a vet move by Moraes to hold on to that choke and even just go for that choke. I think Pumi messed up bad at the end there, be putting himself in a position where that could have even happened. So I think some of the blame does have to fall on him because
Of course.
he shouldn't have ever put himself in that position with
Yeah.
10 seconds left in the fight. He slipped, whatever. Instead of like fighting, instead of like whatever, he just literally just let the choke go in. Like, I thought that was really just not the right move. But he has a chance to get this overturned. I'll say
Hmm.
that. I'll say I do think he has a chance to get this fight overturned and end up having it be a no contest. But it's going to be tough, you know. It's going to be interesting to see whether they feel differently on review and just if an appeal actually does end up doing anything. I hope it does for his sake because it's such a shitty way to get your first career L, you know, especially when you've been trying to get in bigger promotions your entire career. You get onto a really big event and then this happens, and as
Right.
you see now, the scorecards you have up, he was winning 2-0 on two of the scorecards when
Right.
this happened. So the
Right.
decision was all but locked up for him, you know. So it
Yeah.
literally it changed from a win to a loss in a second, literally like a split second.
This to me is the only reason why I think the appeal that they filed might happen. I think by and large appeals don't go through. They have. It's not impossible. It's not zero have ever went through. But I think this is the biggest evidence. What I thought was very important in that moment, as I'm watching this and I'm frustrated and I'm like, okay, that choke was held on too long. Like even before they made the decision to call it a submission loss, I guess I just hate it. I hate seeing somebody do something that, in the spur of the moment, he probably didn't realize he was doing it, but Moraes was holding on that choke a little bit longer. That is a form of, in my opinion, cheating. So I'm angry and upset or whatever. But then immediately when I see them reviewing, I'm like, okay, what matters now? And I don't know if this is something they do. What matters now is who was winning on the scorecards. Because there's a universe where, even though I wouldn't agree with the scoring, if Phumi was losing on the scoring, then it doesn't matter. Call it, lost by decision, lost by submission. It doesn't. I mean, it might matter to him when he's up and at it. He doesn't. Some fighters don't want to lose by submission, but um, that's what was running through my head is who does the scorecards have? And now we know for certain that the person who lost is the person who would have won on the scorecards, and that's why I think there's room for appeal. That is why I think the appeal might have some weight to it, whether it ends up being overturned into a win or a no contest. I have no idea. I think if they didn't have enough, whether it's like camera angles or judgment to say he fell asleep after the bell in the moment, I don't know if an appeal will resurrect some sort of evidence or whatever. I don't know what the decision making process will be, but I am very interested. It's something that you, and I'm sure a lot of other people are going to be paying attention to.
Yeah, no, the appeal process is not something I could ever tell you I understand. The last fight that I remember had a positive appeal that actually overturned was Cody Brundage versus Mansoor Abdul Malik.
Yep.
If I'm not mistaken, that's probably the last appeal we've seen, and it was in the past year. So it's
Yeah.
not like they never happen, but it's very rare that they happen. I forgot why exactly this one got appealed. I think they said a
I think it
point
was finished
deduction.
by the back of the head or strikes to the
Uh,
back of the head or something.
yeah, it was an accidental headbutt that dropped him to the ground, and then it
Yeah.
was like a whole thing. I don't know. They sent it to a no contest, and then oh wait, no, they didn't send it to a no contest because they did a technical decision, and
Mhm.
then they went back and said that because of the headbutt, the technical decision was now a draw, like because there should have been a point taken or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Very confusing, but that's the situations we see appeals overturned in. You know, it's just the most random things that you would never expect to have been overturned.
Yeah.
So will this be? I doubt it, but I would like to see a real review here at least because I think that there's a very decent argument that Pumi got screwed. You know.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, what came to my mind also, like you said, you brought up the Marab fight. I think another one that had something similar, UFC 300, Zhang Wei Li versus Yao Nan Yan, I think that's how you pronounce it. There was something where like in the first or second round, Weili had like a choke, and the bell rings, and Weili gets up, and her opponent's laying there, and it's like, hello, she's out, like what? Then the fight keeps going. The fight never, I remember watching it live. Obviously, it's not something that I think a lot of people will remember. It's been quite a while now, and maybe the fight had a little bit lower name value, or I guess pop behind it, but that is another example of like, okay, a choke happening after the bell ends does not rewrite history. It does not rewrite what happened within those 5 minutes. There's a reason we have a bell and timers. If you knock out in a universe where the bell rings and then I strike late and I knock out my opponent at the 2-second mark after the bell rings, that is not a finish for me. And that's essentially what happened here. I guess the gray area is like, again, hard to tell when he kind of went out, but hopefully, we see the appeal go in the right direction. And I think more than anything, what's important to me is that these appeals are taken seriously. It's less about, which of these fighters I want to win or I think should win, and more so there needs to be room for questions to be asked and answers to be provided. So we'll see what happens there. We already talked a little bit about the next fight, right? Namo Fasil, and his entourage. That was a fun fight, in my opinion. The buildup was, to some folks, maybe a little bit too much. Namo Fasil is very out there. What I want to talk about in particular in regards to him is an interview that he did in the Intuit Dome hallways following his fight, where he broke the news that he's going to be fighting in the UFC, and he was talking about Dana White Contender Series. And you're a huge Dana White Contender Series guys. One of the best people to cover, in my opinion. I think everybody should check out your coverage for this upcoming season. How I felt watching that is like, what part of me is like, oh, that's cool. Like he got his moment. This is a happy story. He got his moment on a big spotlight, and it worked. He's getting his Dana White Contender. Whether he got it because of that fight, we've heard of this before, where like after a fight, a manager will get a call or a text. I don't know when he got it. It seemed like he maybe already had it scheduled, but I can't help but think that does not fit the narrative of this card. That does not fit the story that Ronda Rousey was yelling into the mic at the presser in the buildup. The point of this card is to build, we talked about this in the opening of this video, of this breakdown. I think that they painted a narrative that might be misrepresented. They're not going to go against the UFC in the way that they made it seem, and they shouldn't. They frankly shouldn't. Your thoughts on Namo Fasil revealing? Did you know ahead of time? I don't want to get anyone in trouble.
No.
Your thoughts on him revealing that he's fighting on Dana White Contender Series after fighting on the biggest screw you UFC card, if there ever was one.
Just ironic, like you said. Like ironic is the only way to describe it. It's hysterical. It's so funny because the whole card is built on Ronda, wanting to give fighters another platform. No UFC. They treat their fighters like this. They do this. They do this. This guy picks up a massive win at the last prelim, right? Pretty big spot on the card.
Yeah.
And goes to the back and is like, yeah, we're going to the Contender Series. Let's go. Not even the UFC. It's not even going straight to the UFC. We're going to the Contender Series. Yeah. It's so ironic. So ironic. But
I wish the timing worked up where like I saw that in time to ask somebody that was there, since I wasn't there, to ask like Rhonda or Jake or one of them, like, hey, your thoughts on, you guys had an incredible event today. Oh my God, you blew the UFC out the waters. You really made a statement. By the way, one of your prelim fighters is having a parade in the back because he's fighting on Dana White's Contender Series. You happy for him or what? It's incredible. It's incredible. They're talking
hilarious.
about the pay. I mean, listen, the reality is we're not going to beat around the bush. And I don't think either one of us would ever make the statement. Some people had some personal investments. I think, I watch his stuff all the time. I think Ariel Helwani was really hoping that this would turn into like the actual big competitor, which makes sense. I know he doesn't work directly for, whatever the shindig is. He doesn't work for them. He works with them, whatever. The point is, there are people who wanted this to turn into that. I don't think it was. I don't think it needed to be. I think it's cool. I think they can find longevity in having these like big showcase events, especially if they're able to get every promotion other than the UFC, because they never will, to get every promotion to share rosters. Maybe not with each other, even though it does happen. John Martin of the PFL is talking about sharing with Ryzen and One Championship or whatever, co-promoting fighters. If MVP can be the hub, right? Like if we're talking like they're the center, and it's like a snowflake formation, right? They're the center of the snowflake, and all these branches to all these different promotions exist where they can pull a guy from KSW and put him against the best guy from the PFL, and they can pull someone from one championship, put against some of the killers that are in Ryzen. They have room to succeed. But to say that none of our fighters, where we are right now, we're going to build something where these fighters don't care about Contender Series, don't care about a short notice fight in the UFC, you're wrong. It's never going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. And so if they stop, I think if they can market it that way if they want, if it's working, but as long as they don't aim to do that, they will find success. Evident by the fact that Namo Fazil probably seems more excited about his Contender Series fight than he does getting invited back to MVP 2, which TBD whether it's going to happen, TBD when it'll happen, TBD where it'll happen, TBD everything.
Yeah, for what it's worth, just throw this quick input in. I think Fazil is worthy of Contender Series as well. I mean, he's 10-1. He's a massive finisher, and he has beat some pretty good guys. Like Khaled Amir is a guy that he beat that I actually kind of like. He beat this Russian, Suleimanov, and then he has now the win over Jake Babian, who honestly, Babian was kind of a can crusher, but he was a guy that was getting some buzz out in California on the regional scene there for just winning fights and finishing fights very quickly. So the fact that he now has that win too, he's beaten guys with good records. He's worthy of the Contender Series. He's a solid fighter.
Yeah. Well, we'll fly through some of these last couple fights. The main card, I mean, we touched on it already in the beginning. I think some of the big takeaways for me here, I want to just jump right back into the whole heavyweight discussion for a brief second. There was a whole lot of talk about Jon Jones for some reason. And again, I think it's one of those like, Arman Tsarukyan is here, let's get some cameras on him. It's just like one of those talking points. Cain Velasquez is there. They he has nothing to do with this. It's not like he's on their staff or roster or whatever. He's just a personality. I think they did a lot of the same with Jon Jones, but I think they did take it a couple steps further where they were like, really trying to talk about a fight and building a fight. And the people who I've seen do this very well, in my opinion, are like Conor McGregor, Mike Perry, Darren Till. Like these guys are always talking about fighting each other, especially Conor. Like he's always talking about fighting everybody. He wants to fight his employees. He wants to fight his peers. He'll fight anybody in any weight class.
Try to fight everyone.
You are contractually obligated to execute a couple fights, with the UFC, and nothing will ever change about that. You cannot make that go away. I was asked by somebody recently, as a result of the discussion with Jon Jones that happened on the stream, like realistically, how much would it cost for them to remove him from his contract? How much would it cost if MVP? Because I believe who was it that was there was a UFC fighter that was doing the stream, the MVP stream. I forget who it was, but he was talking to Tyron Woodley. Mm-hmm. He was talking to Jon Jones, and they caught it on stream where he was like, "Have MVP pick up the bill." So somebody asked me, "Hey, have you ever asked a manager? Do you know anything about what it's like to get out of a contract?" Somebody like Jon Jones, from my understanding, from the discussions that I've had, does not have a very simple buyout. It's not like let's put on the fight and then pay the legal fees, pay the ticket that the UFC is going to send us through the courts. That's not how it works. These contracts are written in a way. This is my understanding from a manager. These contracts are written in a way where it's like, you have 2 fights with us left. If you fight anywhere else, all the earnings that you and the promotion earn belong to us. So they word it strategically where it's not like you're going to get fined this much or you're going to get sued this much. It's
we own it.
Somewhere else, it's our fight. So you can't do that. No promotion can afford. You would need some multi-billionaire to just be like, yeah, I'm just going to put on the fight, and then I'll give him all the money. That just doesn't exist, like it's not going to happen. And so unless the UFC gives the okay for him to head out, which if there was a betting line, it would be like plus, 10 million. They're not going to let Jon Jones out of his contract. So it was a huge, in my opinion, waste of time, but it was just cool, I guess, for the stream and the narrative. Do you see any universe where they are able to put on a fight with Jon Jones in any capacity?
No, simply no. I mean, the guy signed an 8-fight deal in 2023. He's fought twice of that 8-fight deal.
Right.
But imagine having to buy out 6 Jon Jones fights. How much that's going to cost?
And the buyouts aren't even, again, from the discussions that I've had, the buyouts aren't even like, what do we think we'll make for each of your fights? You give us that amount. That's what it is for like a number 10 ranked guy. That's what it is for like, somebody who like that's what like Azamat's buyout would be. Like it would be, something where it's like you have 3 fights left. We think we'll make this. We think we'll pay you this much, or we'll make this much. We'll buy you out of your contract, whatever. But somebody for Jon Jones, that's not how it is. It's
No.
like there's probably, if they had to legally put in one, it's going to be some insane number, $250 million buyout, or if you fight somewhere else, we take all the earnings. It's always written strategically where it's next to impossible, evident by the fact that the UFC is now on their second monopoly, anti-competitive lawsuit. Those things don't just happen by accident. They happen because they know what they're doing. They know how to write their contracts. But anyway, that's the Jon Jones stuff. Enough of that. I did have something to say, I guess, about the Diaz Perry fight. And it's, obviously this is going to be a narrative going forward because of how bloody and just nasty that fight felt. I think most people didn't think it was as one-sided as I expected. And I think it's because I followed Mike Perry after the UFC. I followed where he went. I've seen his bare knuckle fights. I don't think that he can ever make a run in the UFC or any other MMA promotion again. I don't even think that he would be like the best welterweight if MVP had 10 more cards and matched him up with other random free agent welterweights. But I think that it made no sense to put this fight together. And I had a feeling that Diaz was going to look very sloppy and bad. I think at best he would survive, and he didn't even do that. So it begs the question, and I wanted your opinion on this. At a certain point, and I think it does exist, but maybe it's just the point is too far. We need to bring it in a little bit. At a certain point, I think athletic commissions need to consider things like speech and cognitive abilities and just there needs to be a better evaluation than, is your blood test good? Are you medically cleared? Like you have no broken bones, and can you sign this form? I think that it's just not enough. Nathan Diaz, his speech has changed over the years. As much as people like to pretend it didn't, he always thought his speech has changed. His cognitive abilities, I'm sure, have deteriorated, evident by how he was throwing, certain strikes and just the way he was performing. I don't think it just wasn't his night and that he hasn't trained. I think those both were the case, but it goes past that. I don't think he should have been cleared to fight. The saying goes, it's the legacy is yours to sell. And who am I? Not a fighter, not an athlete, not somebody who trains as much as he does. I will never train 1/10 of what he has in his career. But I am somebody who can tell when somebody just is out of place, as somebody who's watched thousands of fights. Do you have such strong feelings, I guess, about like a fight, the bloody matchup we saw that night?
Maybe not such strong feelings as he shouldn't have been cleared, but strong feelings as in he should never step foot near a cage again. Like I don't want to see Nate Diaz fight ever again. Just to be straight up with you, that was an embarrassment. He was done after like half a round, maybe, and then just got battered. It was like battered badly.
He wanted to keep going.
He landed a couple nice jabs, but I mean, it was just like it was like fun, like old unk fun for like maybe the first round, and then the second round was just a brutal beatdown, and it was just like going back to what you said though, like about Mike Perry, like he probably won't be the best welterweight, that's on these MVP cards. I think Jason Jackson's a better damn welterweight than him. I don't even think he was the best welterweight on this MVP card.
Agreed.
So, like, I definitely agree on that point. But when it comes to Nate, like, I don't know if they should stop sanctioning him. I think he should have some self-control and just stop fighting because it's obviously just over for him, like so over for him. But if you're sanctioning guys like JDS, I really can't say that Nate's even the worst sanction on the card, because JDS, heavyweight, been knocked out 8 times before this, 42 years old. At least Nate, you could say he's under 40 years old, right? He's under 40. He's like just under, if I'm not wrong.
Nate, I believe so.
Oh no, he's 41. He's 41 now.
Okay,
so 41, but still younger than JDS. Has only been knocked out twice in his career before this. One was a doctor stoppage. Don't get me wrong. He's obviously taken some severe damage, like you said. I think the speech has definitely changed, even though I think he's always kind of talked weird. The speech has definitely gotten worse. There's definitely signs of potential CTE and stuff like that there, which you never want to see. But I think there's honestly, you can make an argument that he wasn't even the worst potential clearance on this card,
Yeah. I mean, maybe the how bloody it was and maybe seeing Mike Perry fight bare knuckle. I've been to, I think, like 2 of his last 3 or 4 bare knuckle fights, and they were all wars. Like, I know that he can take a beating better than Diaz can right now. But I suppose it's just the fact that his scar tissue is way too much. He's just going to lose like, several quarts of blood every fight. Even if you give him someone he could stick around with, the utilities of his facial structure, his head, the skin tissue, it's just not fun to watch. It's not fun to watch, and it makes the fight feel wrong. So that's that. I had a lot of like different notes just about the main card in general, not specific fights, like the triple header main event thing. I think that'll never make sense to me. It's not a main event.
It didn't make sense to me either.
You could advertise it however you could say, like, all these could be a main event, but they're not all main events. Let's be real. There was a narrative about the Rousey Carano fight being rigged. Let's be real. I mean, it's a huge risk. Like, rigging a regulated sport is a major, major crime. And also, what about this makes it feel rigged? All of Rousey's arm bars, or most of her arm bars, are within a few seconds. And it's not like there wasn't, an age and experience gap. It's not like Gina Carano, fought 2-3 years ago. She fought more than double-digit years ago. The rig thing is dumb. I guess it's a narrative that just comes with such a quick finish with the build-up. They had to build it up some way. The pacing was great up until, I think, those last three. And I mentioned it to you before. Does it feel like they were waiting for the UFC main event to end? Because I think there was a massive, an inconsistent gap between, I believe, the last two fights that didn't exist anywhere else in the card. From the first card
I was going to say the prelims, and I think the start of the main card, the pacing was perfectly fine.
Right.
It got so bad towards the end, so bad, to the point where I have to say, yes, I think they were waiting to make sure the UFC main event was over so that all potential eyes could be on their main event of Rousey Carano, the thing that they were marketing most. And to follow your point before of, the rigging and whatever, Ronda Rousey, first submission in the first 30 seconds, plus 1,600. You could have won some real money on Saturday.
To be honest, hindsight's always 20/20, but it should not have been that big of a bone, a plus, underdog or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, looking back, sometimes you look back at these things, I'm like, how did I not realize that was going to happen? Like,
I bet that.
Gina Carano.
I nailed that.
Very
one.
Nice.
It was a plus 1,600 though on a first 30-second submission.
I fell for the hype, man.
How many times has Ronda done that though? You know what I mean? It's not like rigging this, that, whatever. I mean, how many times has she done that shit? It's been a couple.
Yeah, I mean, I looked at her topology the night of, and I was like, yeah, I don't know, I didn't see this coming.
She's never been to a decision,
Good promotion on their part, because they really did make it seem like, it was going to be obviously Gina Carano's no slouch. Like, let's be real, fighting out of the gym that she's at with John Wood. And like, I'm sure she trained seriously. She lost, whatever, 100 pounds. Like, that's crazy. She did incredible feats of human nature to get to the fight in general. But it was just no match to where Ronda Rousey.
And now we know why, based on that payout, huh? Payouts that came out.
Yeah, the pay is, that's one of those things that it's like, it's hard to talk about, because like, there's always these narratives of like, these are not the right number. These are the numbers that they put on paper, and they gave everyone bonuses. So the tax situation, I don't know. I have no idea. Certainly, there's no denying they got paid better than most of them. I think the triple main event headliners would have gotten paid more in the UFC. Everybody else, I think, got paid what they would have gotten in like 3 fights in the UFC. Let's be real. So that was good. That's good, I'm trying to see any other thoughts I had. Yeah, the LED lights thing was interesting. There's a huge narrative about the arena was empty up until the last second. I mean, if we're being honest, they didn't sell out. I mean, that's no secret. They didn't call it a sellout. And we had friends there, and we had, you could see on people's socials, you could see on their socials, there were giant parts of the arena empty. But I think at its peak, I take the word of the folks that were there that at its peak, the attendance was around 75 to 80%. Like, I have no reason to believe otherwise. I'm sure with there will be some factual numbers on the attendance or whatever. It might be out there already, but the LED light thing in Intuit Dome is pretty genius, because like, you can't tell. It looks really cool, but you can't tell who the hell is there and who's not.
Well, my friend's dad walked up, right? Because I was at my friend's house. His parents came home late. I think it was like right before the co-main event. And he's looking and he's like, wow, they sold out. They're packed. I'm like, no, those are lights on the seats. He goes, no, look, those are people. Those are people. Right. And then he looked for a second, and then the lights changed from white to red.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
LED lights.
I thought it was the
And
bracelet.
he goes, oh, he's like,
Exactly.
yeah, they did not sell out.
Genius.
Like,
Genius. I thought
it
it was the
was
bracelets,
genius.
right? But the bracelets require humans to wear them. The
Yeah.
LED on the seats doesn't require humans. So it's big brain move for intuitive dome engineers. I'd love to attend some fights there, one day. But like I said, I think it's no secret that it was empty for a lot of the card, which is it's kind of a good thing because it just means that like the ticket price. I think when the ticket prices are a little bit more expensive, people tend to want to go earlier, get your money's worth. But I think, I saw some folks getting in for 75, 85, $95, and they were like pretty, they weren't sitting up in the heavens. So, maybe there's just not much to say there about the whole seating thing. Maybe we can wrap up with this unless something else comes to mind. Dana White goes on live, makes a little announcement. I think you and I kind of got a heads up from somebody that this would happen. So there was clearly some sort of discussion going on in the larger, media community. But as Francis is making his walkout, Mr. Dana White, Uncle Dana, gets on UFC Live and announces, the entire card. But realistically, he's really announcing Conor McGregor's return. I don't even want to get into how am I excited? Am I not excited? Do I care? Do I not? How do I? It's a banger card. Let's be real. I'm gonna watch it. I mean, I'll watch any Apex fight. I haven't missed a UFC fight in a long time, so it's not a question of whether or not the news is important or relevant. It was a question of why did he do it in that moment, and I think the theory for why he wouldn't do something like that was they have a good relationship with Netflix and Turkey, and they've done the boxing stuff over there. And then the WWE obviously has Raw on Netflix. So there is an indirect link in the family tree of giant businesses that links Dana White, TKO UFC to Netflix. But he did it. He did it. And it was cool to see a vintage. We don't see those like sly moves in the MMA world. A lot of them happened before I even was watching regularly. So it's nice to witness it firsthand. Do you have anything else to say about Dana White, strategically going on live from the Apex? Like that's a thing he does. No, it's not. But your thoughts on that?
It's Dana White. I mean, he always, like, every time there's something going on with Francis, especially, every time he just has to try to one up it, try to make it bigger. And I feel like he did a decent job at it this time. I mean, Max and Conor was already heavily rumored, so it
Right.
wasn't like it came out of nowhere, So I guess it could have had more shock value. But I feel like, a lot of people were talking about the McGregor Holloway fight instead of the Francis Ngannou finish,
Exactly.
But I also think part of that was, like I said before, the opponent they chose for Francis. I don't think anyone ever expected him to lose. I don't think most people saw it as like a big matchup like that. So I understand why, but it is pretty crazy now. Like it's funny that every time something happens with Francis Ngannou, Dana White is there to swoop up and get some action on it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it was, like you said, strategic to do it during the walkout. I had a friend in a group chat that said, like, I don't understand why Dana would do this. Like, what is the benefit? Like, what's the point of doing this? It's not like anybody's gonna stop watching and pay attention to the news. And I'm like, you are smoking the finest of crack if you think that announcing an official Conor McGregor fight return will not completely alter the algorithm of anybody remotely interested in fights across the world. I mean, Conor McGregor fight news hits uncles, aunts, and grandmas. The point wasn't to get people to turn off Netflix. The point was to take over the discussion of Saturday night in a different way, and they did it. I don't think it was as detrimental. I think it's more of a slap to the face. I don't think it's meant to. Again, I don't think they were like going to drop their viewership. It probably did a little bit. I mean, a tiny bit. Probably people heard, oh, Dana, and they probably just switched UFC, like not even realizing, because they did show the card up for a couple seconds, but I don't think that was the goal. The goal was to change the narrative and to it's like a like a backhanded compliment kind of thing where it's like, oh yeah, have your little card. Cause he said, I wish Ronda and Gina the best. He said this in the lead up. And then he did something that I don't think was really wishing them the best. So, if you're one of the folks that says like, oh, it's probably not a huge narrative, but I have a friend at least who thought it was just a coinky dinkle. No, it wasn't. It was strategic. And I hate to say it, but it was awesome. I like to see the because it just fires everyone up, right? It makes both promotions want to go harder. So
Yeah,
it's good news for us.
definitely. And
Yeah,
it is just, like I said, it's a Dana White move. I'm not surprised at all by the decision
that's
of
right.
him to do it. It's exactly something he would do.
Shout out Uncle Dana, man. We're back. We're back. There's all this talk. He's doing the Zuffa and the slap and the this and that. Listen, he's still got it. He dropped
Oh
some
yeah.
Conor news.
Yeah, he still
So
knows what he's doing. There's
that's
no
right.
doubt about that.
That's right. Anything we missed? Any final thoughts on this, Pat?
No. I think we covered most of the points, most of the
Well,
main
there we
points.
have it.
I think we're good. It was a pretty solid card. I'm looking forward to see if they do another one.
There we have it. There we have it. Hopefully, in the next one, we could talk about it before ahead of time. I hit you up a little bit late for this one, but I had a blast. I'm really thankful for you giving me the time to
Oh, of
hang out and
course,
chat
bro.
and catch up. Folks can find you Pat Danna MMA on Instagram or Cage Side Press or Prospect Vault. Is that right?
Yes,
Did I miss
yes.
anything?
No.
All righty. Well, thanks everyone for watching. Be easy. God bless, and we'll see you in the next one.
See you in the next one. Thank you, everyone.